Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess, marketing exec by day, AI experimenter by day, night, and basically every other waking moment in between at this point.
And I'm Kyle, your resident tech guru. I've spent the last decade building data systems, products, and AI tools that solve real-world problems. Each week, we'll break down AI concepts, tools, or trends that actually matter for your business.
So whether you're a small business owner, an entrepreneur, or you're just tech curious, let's dive in. Just think of us as your guides through the wild, wonderful, and sometimes completely overwhelming world of AI.
This is Early Adopter.
Welcome back to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess.
And I'm Kyle. All right, Jess, how's your week been this week?
It's been pretty work heavy. I'm working on a project at the minute that is going to run until kind of early November. So really, it's just going to be work focused for the next couple of weeks. But I no longer have my cold, which I am thrilled about because by the end of recording the pod last week, I was really feeling it. My throat was killing me. All the talking is never a good idea when you've got a cold.
And we do a lot of talking here.
We certainly do a lot of talking here. Exactly.
Well, I think I took some of your sickness because I finished up last night and I just had the worst headache. And I did do my errands. I was productive, but it was a slog, let me tell you.
That's the worst. Do you remember? I actually had a migraine a couple of months ago when we were recording the pod. Do you remember? It was right before I went to Cannes and we were supposed to record at like 8:30 in the morning before I caught a train. And I had to message you and I was like, we're going to have to wait about an hour. And I thought I was going to die in the middle of that podcast. I felt so bad.
Well, you have like proper migraines. Mine was
I do.
Mine was just like a little stress, dehydration, lack of water migraine.
And lack of sleep, because you have been messaging me at like 1 o'clock in the morning this week. So
it's been rough. I will say I did have one night though that was self-induced, which was I played poker on Thursday, and I'll tell you, I got my ass handed to me. It was embarrassing. I should be a lot better at poker and not so much.
See, I've tried to learn how to play poker and it's like the instructions just do not stick in my brain. I'm not great with like board games and stuff. For some reason, my brain just doesn't hold that information. But yeah, I know it is interesting. But I do remember gambling with you in Vegas and you did pretty well, right? I think if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the blackjack is my go-to.
I was going to say it wasn't poker. We definitely didn't play poker in Vegas, but I remember being at the tables with you and when we were for conferences.
Well, when it's just the numbers, it's great. Like just the stats around it, like I'm good with that bit. When you add in the emotional component and trying to play the player and all that,
the good old poker face.
I got, as you know, Jess, I had zero poker face. I'll give my one little quick story, which is I remember playing poker in Vegas. The last time I played poker in Vegas, I thought I had I had like two pair. The guy played. We get to the end. I turn over my cards thinking I had lost with my two pair. The dealer hands me the chips. I only realized I had a different, like I had like a straight or a flush or something.
Oh my God.
And the other guy said to me, he goes, wow, I had you on two pair. That's when I realized I had no business playing poker because he knew the cards I thought I had. And the only reason I won is because I was an idiot.
Oh my
I didn't see the cards.
That's amazing.
I got up off the table after that and I haven't played poker in Vegas since.
That's amazing. I love that story. Oh my God. Okay, well, you learned your lesson. So let's get into the pod. So today we are going to talk about AI Slop. And AI Slop is I guess you could say it's a tidal wave of low quality AI generated content that has been flooding the internet and our workplaces recently. And it's not only a problem because it's annoying, because it's definitely annoying, but it's actually costing businesses millions of dollars and it's potentially breaking the internet. Not to mention, it's also causing a real issue with training data. So we'll definitely be talking about all of that.
Yeah, and the timing is good to talk about this. With the major launches from OpenAI and Meta, it's going to make generating this content even easier. Sora 2 was released, which is OpenAI's video generation app. I think it got more downloads in its first week than ChatGPT did, which is pretty impressive.
Well, it also has kind of broken Hollywood in the last week because there's been a lot of, I think we talked about this briefly in last week's episode rather, but there's been a lot of conversation because it was very easy to generate copyrighted characters in...
Less guardrails.
Yeah, exactly. In Sora, which meant that, of course, all of the studios were up in arms because of their IP. All of the talent agencies were up in arms. So it was quite a big deal. And they actually have backtracked pretty quickly on that one because they were about to get sued into the ground for that.
I mean, remember the entertainment industry, multiple unions just went through a whole bunch of different strikes around this very issue. And then not a year later, that kind of concern is playing out.
Exactly.
For anyone who basically was saying, why are all of these actors and directors and whatnot going on strike? Well, this is why.
Well, there was also a big thing around their opt-in policy rather than their opt-out policy, which essentially meant that the onus was on the talent to take themselves out of it rather than the talent to ask to be included in it, basically.
Well, and they were basically making the assumption that they had a perpetual license on their likeness forever, which...
Yeah, exactly, which is insane.
Has never existed for content.
But before we get too far into AI Slop, we have a quick update on AEO after our 2-part series last week. And this one, again, the timing on all of this stuff is just crazy. So this was one that you found. You want to get into it?
Yeah, when I saw this, I sent it to you right away. Yeah. So last 2 weeks, we covered answer engine optimization, or AEO, and how the future of search is conversational AI rather than traditional blue links or traditional SEO, search engine optimization. Well, Google just made a move that accelerates that transition dramatically and really, I would say, changes the landscape pretty significantly.
So what happened?
Yeah, so Google quietly killed a URL parameter, but it's just like when you go and you search up at the top, your URL is www.google.com. But the parameter allowed for 100 results to be shown on a single page. Now, most people have never heard of that because that's not typical user behavior. This change that they've made, it doesn't really do anything for the user behavior, but it was really foundational to how the entire SEO industry operated. And as we talked about last couple of weeks, by extrapolation, how AEO worked.
Interesting. So let's put that into plain English. Explain it for the normal people out here.
If I go to Google and I search for something, I see 10 results. And as we talked about, most people never get beyond those 10 results. But if you added this parameter to the end of your little string, google.com/etc. URL, you could see 100 results on one page. And, it's not really advertised to users. It's not something you typically come across. It's a leftover feature from older versions of Google. But what was happening, and we talk about this 2-part internet, all of the bots and the SEO tools, and more recently, all of these AI scraping tools, they used that constantly so that they could get access to a much wider number of results, or 100 of them.
So why does this matter for what we were talking about then?
Yeah, so tools like we mentioned, SEMrush and Ahrefs and all of these different companies that have built on top of SEO and the AEO tools, their data pipelines are built around this. So instead of them making 10 separate requests and having to paginate through, from page 1 of Google to page 2 of Google and all of that, they would just see 100 search results. So they could make one request. It was much more efficient.
So basically, it was like we see 10 results because we're seeing the front page of Google, and then we'll see the next 10 results and the next 10 results because we're kind of paging through. But this is essentially them seeing all those 10 pages at once.
Exactly. Now, there are some technical reasons that they did this. So Google, for instance, really identified that no user behavior is looking at 100 results. We look at 10, right? Yeah. So they're not changing anything from a user perspective. They probably identified that there's this massive bot scraping system within the internet that's using this and kind of using it for free to benefit. And from Google's perspective, pulling 100 results is going to be a little bit more taxing on their ecosystem and infrastructure. Now, on an individual basis, not much. But when you consider the fact that Google has billions of searches a day, that kind of adds up quite a bit. And so in some ways, they were feeding an entire segment of the internet for all of this bot and crawling for free, and then having to eat the cost. So there is kind of a bit of a technical reason beyond just Google now is going to make their AI a little bit better, which we'll get into. They did this a couple weeks ago in mid-September without really warning anyone. And I think the fallout has been a pretty big deal. So rank tracking tools had to completely rebuild their infrastructure. Now they're going to be making 10 times more requests to see who, is actually showing up in results. So that's going to cost 10x more in bandwidth. And unfortunately, many are probably passing those costs to customers.
Okay, so to summarize, basically, this parameter made it really easy to scrape Google's index, right? So now Google is actively making it harder for AI models to train on its web data.
Exactly. What we're seeing is a bit of a choke point. So Google's tightening the AI supply chain, controlling who can access high quality web data. If you're training a large language model or building like a retrieval system, as we talked about, which is really important for AEO, this move suddenly makes Google's data 90% harder and costlier to access. So they're saying if you want the full web, you're going to have to partner with us, not just scrape us for free. And the results on this are actually pretty telling because when Google removed this parameter a couple of weeks ago, Search Console impressions dropped 40 to 60% for many websites. So a lot of companies panicked because they thought that they were suddenly being penalized for something and they didn't know why. But it's important to note the impressions that disappeared weren't really human traffic. And I think that's a really interesting indication of what's happening on the internet these days. This was all bot generated visibility. So if your page ranked number 47 for a keyword and no human ever scrolled to page 5 to see it, as we know people don't, were you really getting that impression? So how much has the internet and all of our traffic metrics been bloated by a lot of this bot activity? Google was counting it before because bots using this parameter technically loaded it, but there was never a person behind it that was doing something with it. It's like the old, if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? Absolutely. If there's an impression and it's a bot, is it really an impression? Oh my God. So basically the impressions that vanished were never really traffic, like real traffic anyway. Totally. It kind of exposes how much of the visibility, right, this entire SEO industry was tracking only existed in the eyes of the bots. It was not actual humans. So how does this then connect to AEO? I don't think this is too inflammatory to say that the 10 blue links model of the internet that we've grown and become accustomed to is now dead. And I don't think we should pretend otherwise. This is like a real inflection point for the internet to understand how AI traffic is changing things. Effectively, Google's rebuilding their entire business model around this conversational context and AI generated answers as a result, not the individual keyword rankings. And we see this all over, but I think this is like a really big moment for that. And weirdly, it kind of just like was thrown out and then disappeared in the ether. Yeah, it was actually quite hard to find some news articles about this, which was interesting. I found it on Search Engine Land, which is a SEO specific website, like a news publication. So it's interesting how this kind of really flew under the radar. But I guess this means that like if your strategy relies on, ranking number 23 for a bunch of keywords, you're basically optimizing for a version of Google that has completely changed. And in some ways, we were talking last week about how SEO still matters. Well, it actually probably made SEO more important now. Like you really have to get in those first 10 results because all the bots are going to be only probably reading those as well. Interesting. But the web just got, and the reason it probably hasn't showed up so much is it doesn't affect user behavior. So no one's probably really noticing it. And as far as bot behavior goes, it's probably more of like a long tail. You won't see it play out for a little while, but you might start to notice that the AI bots, or when you're asking questions, you maybe see a little bit less information, a little bit less of that long tail data. But for AEO being cited in the AI's answer itself, this doesn't really matter because you're not completely relying on ranking position. It is important, but you're relying on part of the response. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out fully. I think it's actually pretty ironic because, Google is essentially making the open web smaller, but it's also kind of behind the scenes, it's cutting deals with platforms like Reddit. I mean, just as well as I do that Reddit content always lives on, page 2 or 3. Like there's always a Reddit answer because people on Reddit talk about absolutely everything. Yeah. And now those Reddit answers wouldn't show up. But Google's now paying Reddit for direct API access. So Gemini can use those authentic human conversations in its AI overviews. So while Reddit lost visibility in search, it's gained leverage as a paid data supplier with Google. That's, I think, the new trade-off, visibility versus licensing.
So it basically turns Reddit from an SEO player into a data supplier. And honestly, that sort of data is, because it's paid for, that's probably going to get used more than the free stuff anyway.
Although we'll get to this, but the AI slop thing is going to be an issue.
Well, it absolutely is. Yeah. So to sum all of this up, Google's 10 cap results isn't just a user experience tweak, it's kind of a signal. So they're essentially consolidating the control of the data, they're tightening the AI supply chain, and they're really forcing the rest of the ecosystem. So that could be Reddit, publishers, SEO agencies, all of that to pick sides almost.
Yep. And for anyone doing AEO, as we talked about, the takeaway is brutal, but kind of simple. You need to be on page one. If you don't, you may not exist because it's going to become a lot harder to see those long tail results.
So the AI framework that we covered last week, that means that it's even more urgent now than it was a week ago. See, we keep saying things move so quickly in this space.
I know. Yep. But good to stay on top of it. So
definitely.
With that, Jess, let's go to our main topic today, which is about AI slop.
That's right. Okay, so let's start with the basics. What exactly is AI slop?
So slop is a term that emerged in online communities to describe low quality AI generated content. It's not just any AI generated content though, and that's important. It's the stuff that's obviously AI made, low effort, and really adds no value. So think of it as the digital equivalent of junk food. Cheap, easy to produce in massive quantities, probably doesn't have a lot of human oversight. There's no human in the loop on this. Doesn't really pass like the sniff test.
Definitely. I think what I really love about this term, I also feel like we're going to say this term so many times in the next 45 minutes that it's going to stop making sense. But what I love about it is that it just really captures that feeling when you encounter it. Like a lot of the times you look at it immediately and you're like, oh my God, this is garbage. Yeah. I mean, we've all seen those videos of like someone's dog, thing down the street, and then all of a sudden it turns into a human walking on its hind legs, and it's really weird and creepy. Like we've all seen those videos. Yeah.
Or the one where like the wave like somehow turns into like a person. And
yes,
you're like,
yes.
Why would we even create that?
Who wants this? No one does. That's the problem.
The technical definition is unwanted AI generated content of low value or accuracy. So again, the unwanted part is the key part. And to be fair, not all AI generated content is slop. If you're using AI to write, edit thoughtfully, add genuine value, even create videos and photos and stuff, that's augmentation. That's everything that we encourage people to do to make what you're doing better. But slop happens when the human judgment layer is skipped. So you hit generate and post whatever comes out automatically. You build that N8N workflow that just pushes content out. Technically, what you're seeing there is low signal output, content with little original information or context. It's often very average, sometimes even factually wrong because of the AI hallucinations.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's really about intent and quality control, because AI assisted content that's been shaped and verified by a human, that's not slop, but that kind of fully automated, unedited, really mass produced content, that is like the textbook definition of slop. And I think we can all recognize that when we see it. Well, maybe we can't. Maybe that's part of the problem.
Well, and slop takes a lot of forms. Yeah. There's the very obvious stuff. AI generated blog posts stuffed with keywords, tons of emojis everywhere. Right?
So many emojis.
That many emojis.
My God, it's like the hallmark now. Especially the rocket
fake
ship.
Product reviews that sound really similar or like everything else there. Automated social media posts optimized for engagement. Again, this is the emojis. But there's also workplace slop, which is becoming kind of its own category. These are AI generated reports, meeting summaries, emails that sound polished but say nothing meaningful. I think we're going to get into more of that, but it's the same root cause, automation without oversight. The machine can generate, but only humans can discern. And I see this a lot. I see a lot of emails come around these days where it's very clearly AI generated.
This is all coming back to your hatred for AI SDRs, isn't it?
Oh, don't even get me started, Jess.
But that's part of the problem, right? So
the worst.
Before we get like too much further into this, I think let's talk about one of the things that really was the catalyst for this episode. And we mentioned it before, but that is the launch of Sora, OpenAI's video generation app. Like the numbers and the downloads were pretty shocking for this. So, I mean, we say that people don't want it. Actually, there clearly is a demand because there was a lot of downloads for this.
Some of it's trivial, some of it's just because you want to try it out.
Yeah,
but yeah, as we talked about, Sora hit #1 in downloads in 5 days, surpassed ChatGPT in downloads for its first week. So what I think it shows is that more people wanted to create AI videos than use a general purpose AI assistant.
And, the technology is really impressive. You can create some incredibly hyper-realistic videos from text prompts. The demos look amazing. But I think one thing that's really worrying is they built it with this kind of TikTok style feature. So you can browse AI generated videos, you can remix it, you can share them. They're really encouraging this kind of mass production and virality with it, which I don't think is the best idea in this instance.
Yeah, they're copying TikTok. And obviously TikTok has been wildly successful around that virality component.
Yep. Videos on TikTok. I actually saw one the other day because my friend and I have this, we've been doing it for probably 4 or 5 years now where we try and find the weirdest videos to send each other. And it's usually like someone dancing in a weird costume or something. But I actually almost sent him a video the other day and I saw it had a Sora watermark on it. And I was like, actually, I am not going to send that because I don't know if that's real.
Well, most people are probably sending that. Yep. And that remix feature is probably quite viral. So you can take someone else's AI generated video and modify it. And on the one hand, that's very creative and collaborative. And there's a reason that works. But on the other hand, back to our conversation today, it's a slop multiplier ultimately. One AI generated video becomes a template for hundreds more. And as we talk about model degradation, each one of those versions is going to get a little bit worse and a little less real.
Yeah, definitely. And then Meta, launched their AI generated content feed, which is something that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. It's an app called Vibes.
For the vibes.
So stupid. So this is basically
it's
just
such a bummer because I love that term. And now, it's dead. Gonna ruin it for me.
Of course, Zuckerberg is the one who turned it into, like, he immediately killed the cool. Because that's
he's like taking all the cool words, meta, vibes.
I know.
Remember we used to say like, oh, that's so meta.
Yep, not anymore.
Now you can't say that.
But with this app, you basically can just scroll through like an infinite feed of synthetic images and videos that never existed until you scrolled past them. This is just so unnecessary.
Well, it's because of, shout out to Lee, attention versus intention economy.
Exactly.
This is just about getting more and more of your time and attention.
Yep.
Now, Meta's positioned this as personalized entertainment. The AI generates content based on what you might like. Again, this is the algorithm. Cute animals, Egyptian selfies,
Egyptian selfies. What even is that?
Or I don't know if we're going to talk about it, but like the shrimp Jesus.
Yeah. I don't think we are going to talk about it. I
definitely went down a rabbit hole researching shrimp Jesus.
Shrimp Jesus. Oh
but this is, synthetic media on demand. And it happens at a pace that no traditional content generation can ever match.
Yeah. Which sounds fun until you think about the implications, because we're training people to consume content that has zero connection to reality. There was no intention or no thought or effort that went into this. No one decided it was worth sharing. It was just an algorithm that was created to keep you scrolling.
Both of these launches are technologically impressive. The quality of what Sora and Meta can generate is much better than what we've seen in the past. But they've removed a lot of the friction from content generation. So anyone can generate hundreds of videos or images in an afternoon. And not to mention, Hollywood is really in uproar about this, potentially rightfully so.
I definitely think rightfully so. It's almost like, I'm going to date myself here. It's like when WordPress made it really easy for anyone to start a blog. There were suddenly millions of blogs. Or, when podcasting became a thing, there were suddenly millions of podcasts, many of which were not great. I know, right? Many of which were not great, but at least people were involved with those. Like, at least there's a human element of it. This is just automated garbage at scale.
All right, so let's talk about why this matters beyond just being annoying. There are 3 major problems with AI slop that we see. 1, it's polluting the internet. Two, it's going to tank productivity. Think about how much more people are just scrolling and looking through, and that virality is going to really cause us more problems. And three, which I think is probably where we want to maybe focus on a little bit, is this is going to break future AI models or contribute to that model degradation. But Jess, let's start with the internet pollution component.
Absolutely. And I think we should actually just flag actual pollution as well, because you're generating all of these things completely unnecessarily. Right?
The environmental impact.
The environmental impact, exactly.
For sure. Because this uses a lot of processing power for these videos.
This uses so much, and it's so unnecessary. But anyway, if we focus purely on the internet, the internet is actually starting to become almost unusable for finding information. There was a study in Nature that found that AI-generated content now makes up a significant portion of web content, and it's growing exponentially. Some researchers are estimating it could be 30 to 50% of new content in certain categories.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the vicious cycle that we're talking about. So AI models are trained on internet data. As more AI generated content floods that internet data, future AI models get trained on the AI generated content, and you kind of just see where this goes, right? It's photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. This is so random, but it makes me think of, do you remember that Michael Keaton movie where he like clones himself?
Yes.
And the clone of the clone who ends up being kind of a little special.
I can't remember what it was called. Was it like Mimic or something like that? Like, I can't remember.
Duplicity.
That's it. Duplicity. That's right.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, it was hilarious, but that's
exactly
effectively what's going to happen. The clone of the clone of the clone.
It's like we mentioned before. It is the snake eating its own tail.
Each generation is going to degrade further and further.
Exactly. So researchers call this model collapse. And this is essentially when AI systems are trained predominantly on AI generated data. They really lose the ability to produce diverse, high quality outputs. And they just start converging on this kind of repetitive, homogenized content.
And there's some really interesting studies on this. We have seen that played out in controlled environments. Researchers have trained AI models on increasingly AI-heavy data sets and found that after multiple generations, so again, that clone of a clone of a clone, the models completely lose the ability to generate novel content, something that's new. It just becomes the same thing over and over. They collapse into producing the same generic outputs.
So we're essentially creating a death spiral, which seems a little extreme, but it is kind of true when it comes to training the AI models, because more AI content means worse AI training data, means worse AI outputs, which means even worse AI content, even worse training data, just around and around and around and around. And once the whole of the internet is, or even just enough of the internet is synthetic slop, you can't really reverse that.
No, you can't. The internet doesn't really have an undo button. Nope. And in some ways, while some AI slop is easy to point out, at scale, you can't really identify what is and what isn't. So that could be a real problem. And I think we're already starting to see this happen a bit. So Google search results are increasingly filled with AI-generated content farms. Reddit threads are polluted with bot-generated responses. You have people trying to moderate that, but I mean, there's just an explosion of content. You can't get all of it. And I think we've all been worried about this for a long time, but product reviews, how many of those are real? If all the product reviews are like that, how do you discern what's good and what isn't? We're losing a lot of that kind of collection or knowledge of the masses.
I had someone reach out to me the other day asking if I had automated the content generation for my newsletter. And I said to him, absolutely not, because I totally use Claude to help me write that newsletter, right? But I would never hand it over fully to AI because there's so much knowledge and so many things that it is so heavily edited. And I'm not the only one who edits it. My colleague edits it as well. And I do so much iterating on that because I remember things that we covered, 3 or 4 months ago, and I want to make sure that we talk about that, or actually, no, this is what the focus should be. So I'm constantly iterating that. And I would never, ever trust the AI to just fully hand over that to them.
Well, it's the human in the loop. How do you optimize yourself? But at the end of the day, you still need to be responsible for.
But that being said, I could never write the newsletter without AI. So there is definitely I do lean very heavily on it, but also I don't think you would be able to tell that the output is AI generated because of how much work we put into it.
I wanna maybe just clarify. You use it as
given the bandwidth,
you use it as a way
yeah,
to like, speed up a lot of what you're doing, right? The amount of content that you produce is probably equivalent of like a full-time role for someone who's, not even very junior. So that's, I would say, the difference is use it to optimize.
I do, but I also use it almost to organize my thoughts sometimes. Like I know that this story is important, but I'm not 100% sure about why it's important, but I know that it is. So sometimes I use it to like connect the dots because it will generate something and I'll be like, ooh, that's a good point that I hadn't thought about, but actually this maybe is what we really should be focusing on. So that is also how I use it. But anyway, speaking of using it in the workplace,
yes,
what's next?
Great segue there, Jess.
Thank you. I try. You know me. I'm the queen of segues.
The second problem is workplace slop, or if I can say this correctly, WorkSlop.
Yep.
Yeah. And this one actually has some real dollar figures attached.
Yeah, this was really interesting. So there's a joint study from Stanford and a company called BetterUp that found that WorkSlop, which is this low quality AI generated workplace content, is actually costing businesses an estimated $9 million per 1,000 employees annually.
Interesting. Okay.
I can see you doing the math in your head.
I know. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Yeah,
exactly.
9K per employee. That's, yeah.
Yep.
Now, but maybe break that down for us. What makes up that kind of loss?
It's mostly wasted time. So people generating AI content without editing it, they send stuff to colleagues who then have to spend time reading and responding and, all of that stuff for something that's not really relevant. So that's really what it is. And the study found that on average, employees are spending an extra 5 hours a week dealing with this low quality AI generated content. So that's 5 hours a week of reading emails that could be, 2 bullet points, deciphering unclear AI generated reports or sitting through presentations that were really copy and pasted from ChatGPT.
I will say when I notice that something's verbose and clearly AI generated, my eyes glaze over and I just skip it.
Yeah. Don't even get me started on LinkedIn posts. Oh my God.
Oh, yeah. We'll be at it for a while.
Oh my God. Yep.
What I think though is particularly harmful around all of this is people think they're being more productive because they're producing content faster. You probably feel like you're checking off more items these days than ever.
Yep.
Look, I wrote 3 reports today. I sent 1,000 emails or something absolutely crazy, right? But if those reports are bad quality and you have 10, 20, 30 people reading them, and it's taking them longer to kind of synthesize that data, you've actually decreased productivity as a whole for your company.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of a vicious cycle. Like the individual person saves time by using AI to generate content quickly, but collectively, everyone wastes time dealing with that low quality AI content.
And I think we can kind of see it. The sniff test doesn't really pass.
Yeah, definitely.
And to back this up, who else but Harvard Business Review did a study on this. And they found kind of 4 main components of this, of AI generated workplace content. Tends to be excessively verbose. ChatGPT loves 3 paragraphs when you could probably put one or 2 sentences. We definitely have seen that. It lacks specificity, so generic platitudes instead of concrete details. Now, this comes down to context. So I would say that people could probably bypass this if they give enough context, which is obviously always one of our prompt engineering frameworks that we'll do. And then just in addition to lacking specificity, it also found that it was contextually inappropriate. But this is less about the details and more about understanding like the culture, the company culture, the specific situation, or how people interact specific to that company. All companies have a little bit of a different personality. And so obviously the AI doesn't capture that. And then the last bit that the study found was it requires more clarification. So if the original intention is to communicate the details and someone has to follow up to actually get that information because it doesn't have the context, that's going to be additional workplace slop created.
Not to mention emojis. That is the hallmark of ChatGPT. That's
How
stupid.
Did that happen?
I don't know.
You got to dig into like why
emojis, especially the rocket ship emoji. Like,
which is such a bummer because I love the rocket ship emoji.
Well,
I used
not
to
anymore.
use the rocket ship emoji.
I know, this is like me and M dashes, right? It's so annoying.
Oh, I know. I miss M dashes. I still put them in. I'm like, screw it. I don't care.
I still do too. Fuck it. Yeah,
like a great M dash in a title.
I know.
Hate to see it. Okay, but there's also the creativity problem. When everyone's using AI to generate first drafts, all the first drafts start sounding the same. Meeting agendas, project proposals, email updates, they all have that distinctive AI cadence or AI jargon. Everything starts to homogenize.
Yeah. And, in creative fields, it's even worse because you have things like advertising copy, product descriptions, which we talked about earlier, marketing content. When everyone's using AI to generate those ideas, all the ideas kind of start to sound the same after a while. And you lose that really weird, interesting human edge that makes content really memorable. Like I remember there was this ad for Cadbury's chocolate here in the UK. This was like probably
Cadbury's.
Probably about 15 years ago. And it was a drumming gorilla. Like it was a gorilla sitting and playing at a drum set. Now, what that had to do with Cadbury's, no idea, but it was like it was one of the most memorable ads. I'm still talking about it like 15, 20 years later. There is no way that AI would have come up with that. It was so weird and quirky and memorable. AI just couldn't do it.
I think we're all guilty of this. I'm calling the kettle black in some ways. I use AI extensively, but again, it has to have that human in the loop. You have to put your own spin on it. You have to provide enough context. All of those things that we talk about endlessly has to be done.
Yeah. And I think that's what's kind of weird about all of it is that AI is actually quite good at generating content. The quality of the text, the quality of the images and video from tools like Sora, it's legitimately impressive. So why is there so much slop? Why is so much of it just really shit?
Because I don't think quality is the problem. I think quality control is the problem. AI can generate a lot of good content, but it also generates a lot of shit. So if a human is guiding it, editing it, adding genuine insight, you can get good stuff. But when slop happens, it's when that human step is skipped and you're just automatically pushing and generating content, probably on a massive loop that's just producing thousands of things. That is slop. And I think there's a psychological element that we should note. Using AI feels like you're doing something, right? You're getting a lot of output. Look, I'm being productive. I've just generated 1,000 pieces of content. I'm going to push it everywhere and everyone's going to think I'm crushing it. But production without that curation is just creating a lot of noise.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the problem isn't necessarily the AI generated content per se, because like meeting notes don't need to be super personalized, right? Like meeting notes, that's fine. I think the problem is like I actually had this the other day where I had recorded something with my Google Meet because I just needed to record something really quickly. And so when I went back and looked at the meeting notes, there were like 3 people in the room and it looked like everything was coming from me because obviously I was the one who was recording and Google Meet can't tell that there's 3 people in the room because there weren't 3 people on the screen. And so I was like, wow, I'm a genius. I know absolutely everything about this particular topic. Like, so it's not like AI generated meeting notes are bad. It's just that when I then went to send someone the meeting notes from that meeting where there were 3 people in the room, I had to heavily edit them. So it didn't seem like it was just all coming from me. So I think that's part of it as well.
And I feel like I'm getting a little preachy. So I'm going to take a step back. I'm just going to say you have to have the right tool for the job.
So basically, I think this means that the only thing that's really preventing slop is individual judgment and restraint. And at scale, that's not really reliable. You can't really do that when you've got an entire, app that's dedicated to just a feed of synthetic shit.
All right, we've just kind of gone on a bit of a rant for a little while. Let's go back to our ethos here, Jess. Let's give a framework. A simple framework is for how not to create slop. Generate, edit, validate, and most importantly, add value. 4 steps.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, generate with intent. So be intentional about what you're generating and why. Don't just throw a vague prompt to ChatGPT and see what comes out. Have a clear purpose because it all comes back to prompt engineering and communication, which is, I know we're always beating this drum, but it is really, really, really important.
A good example of this would be a bad prompt would be write a blog post about AI. The good version of that, draft an outline for a 1,200 word blog post explaining retrieval augmented generation to marketing managers who understand AI basics, but not technical implementations. Focus on practical use cases. That's a good version rather than just something about AI.
Yeah, I think, again, I go back to my meeting notes example, because I think you could, you get a transcript from that call, right? And I think you can create a prompt around that transcript that will give you what you want from it, rather than just the automatically generated meeting notes, which are not going to make sense in that particular context.
Well, and like a quick little aside on that, if you're using Fireflies or Otter, you can actually design prompts from your transcripts that say, give me meeting summaries about X, Y, and Z, pull out sales information, etc. So if anyone is using transcript tools, you can do that.
Yeah, and see, that's intention, and really, you're not just asking to generate the content; you're generating it with intent.
And if you're using AI for workplace communication, so emails, reports, meeting notes, Jess,
meeting notes,
yep. Ask yourself before you send it, do I actually need to send this? Just because AI can create the 3-paragraph email, which again probably should be a 2-sentence email, doesn't mean your colleague needs that, right? Maybe they just need a Slack message with 2 bullet points.
Step 2 is edit ruthlessly. So this is where most people fail. They just generate the content and then immediately hit send. Never send the first draft.
Exactly. So the AI's first output should be a starting point, not the finish line, not what you send out. Read it critically and ask yourself, is this actually what I mean to say? Is it too long where I could make it shorter? Does it sound like me, or does it sound very generic? Are there specific details or context I need to add that I missed in the first version? Because remember, you should have already added context in that first version. But if you miss something, add it in.
And cut the fluff. Like, there's so many filler words that AIs love to use. ChatGPT loves phrases like, it's important to note, or in today's rapidly evolving landscape, which I'm positive that we've all seen. Even with my newsletter content, in my prompt, I specifically tell it not to use words that we noticed it was using too much, and they were driving me insane. So I had to write it into the prompts to cut them out. But those are all just verbal filler. You don't need them.
And then personalized. So add specifics that the AI can't know. Add those subtleties or nuances about the company culture or the conversation that you're having with your colleague that AI could never know, but because it's personal to your interaction. Reference specific conversations that you had. That's a great way to make sure that it's not AI slop. So if you add your actual opinion, not the AI's synthetic opinion, you're actually going to have a proper conversation. It goes back to good communication, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think the editing step is where you really transform AI generated content into your content that happened to have AI assistance. And that's the really key difference.
Yeah. And step 3 is validate for accuracy. This is especially critical if you're generating anything factual. AI models hallucinate. We've talked about this. They make up information that sounds plausible or is based off of something that actually happened, right? But it might be completely wrong or made up. So go back and check out our episode about hallucinations to learn more about that and kind of how to filter that, how to solve for it, etc.
And if your content, your AI generated content, includes statistics or quotes or claims, verify them. Don't just assume that the AI is correct. And this applies to code, by the way, as well. If you're using AI to generate code, actually review it. Don't just copy paste it into production and hope it works. I think we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the AI gone wrong, but people are really getting burned by trusting AI outputs without validating anything.
Yep. And then step 4, this is, I think, one of the most important ones, add genuine value. So this is the final filter. Ask yourself, does this add value that wouldn't exist otherwise? If the answer is no, and you're just adding to the overall AI slop, don't publish it.
Yeah, I mean, the internet definitely doesn't need another generic blog post about 10 AI tools for productivity when you just ask ChatGPT to list the tools and describe them. That adds zero value. That is pure slop. That's part of the problem that we started to see with SEO, where you would just get these really generic blog posts that were stuffed with keywords, right? We want to try and avoid that going forward.
But again, if you actually used those tools, you have specific insights about how they work in practice, or a specific insight about how it's relevant to your industry or someone of your technical level or something that makes it unique to you, and you can offer genuine recommendations based on that experience, that adds value. The AI, as we talk about, the AI can help you structure and write it, but the value comes from your unique insight, your actual knowledge and experience of using those tools.
So the framework, to recap, is generate with intent, know what you're making and why, edit, cut the fluff and add specifics, really make it yours, validate it for accuracy. So check your facts, verify your claims, add genuine value. So contribute something that wouldn't exist without your insight or experience or knowledge.
All right, let's shift to some other AI news from this week. And we've got a big one. OpenAI's Dev Day happened, which is basically just another developer conference, but obviously a lot came out of it.
So Dev Day is always really interesting because it tells you what OpenAI thinks the future looks like. And this year the theme was essentially ChatGPT is becoming an app store. Really interesting.
They announced something called Agent Kit, which is a framework for developers, and very important that that it's a framework for developers to build and deploy AI agents directly in ChatGPT. So think of it like how you can build apps for iOS and they live in the App Store. Now you can build AI agents and they live in ChatGPT.
So in this context, what do they mean by AI agent? Because, we feel very strongly about the phrasing on this.
100%, yeah. It's basically a specialized version of ChatGPT that can perform specific tasks or access specific data. So instead of just chatting with generic ChatGPT, you could have agents for booking travel, managing your own calendar, analyzing your company's sales data, drafting legal documents, whatever specific task you need. You can use kind of an automated workflow to accomplish those tasks.
Let's hope they work better than ChatGPT agent, which you did not have a great experience with. But does this mean that developers can just build them and make them available to ChatGPT users?
Yes. OpenAI is essentially creating an ecosystem where ChatGPT becomes the interface for a lot of tools. And developers will then build specialized functionality in the background that people can use within ChatGPT.
So why does this matter for our audience?
A couple reasons, but one thing I want to make sure that I note, we said it was for developers. This is not really like an N or a Make or a Zapier type tool where it's drag and drop. It is much more developer heavy. You have to kind of try and host this separately yourself. That will probably change and it will become easier. But at the moment, it requires some level of technical savviness. So just want to kind of put that disclaimer in. But as far as why it matters for our audience, first is distribution. So if you build a tool or service, obviously getting people to find it can be very difficult. But if your agent is available in ChatGPT, you have instant access to hundreds of millions of users, almost 1 billion people. So it's a massive distribution hack.
I think it's actually quite similar to instant checkout, and it's really big from a discovery perspective. So instead of just someone finding your website, signing up for your tool, learning your interface, they just ask ChatGPT and your agent is right there. So everything is happening within the ChatGPT conversational interface. So that is very interesting. That's further, keeping on the same lines of what we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks about everything moving into a conversational flow. But also it's like the App Store, right? Like how would you have found an app before the App Store existed? That's the concept.
Yeah. Secondly, which is also very important, it lowers the barrier to building AI powered products. So you don't need to build your own AI model or build API endpoints to a model to create a full application. You build the logic and data access within ChatGPT, and now it's going to handle the interface and all the AI capabilities.
So like if you're a startup that wants to offer, I don't know, AI powered accounting analysis, you don't need to build a whole AI system. You build an agent that can access accounting data and perform specific analyses, and then you let ChatGPT handle the conversational interface aspect.
Yeah.
And OpenAI has also announced that they are working on hardware with Jony Ive, yes, the guy who developed the iPhone. This is something that we talked about a couple of months ago when OpenAI bought his company. And this suggests that they're thinking about AI interfaces beyond just a screen, which is very interesting.
And we don't really know what that looks like yet. So the partnership was only just announced, but it's likely going to be some kind of AI first hardware. So could be something like a more sophisticated version of those like little AI pins people have tried and unfortunately failed to make work.
Yeah, those did not end well. But also like Apple's supposedly doing something with AI glasses similar to what Meta's doing. I've also read recently that Amazon are looking at AI glasses as well. So it kind of makes sense that that's an area that OpenAI would move into.
Yeah,
so
it could totally be something around those lines. Absolutely.
exactly.
I mean, people have been trying to make AI or assisted glasses a thing since obviously way back
What
in
was
the
it?
day.
Google Glass.
Google
Remember
Glass,
those? Yeah, the
so much money wasted.
Snapchat lenses. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hardware and everything in between. Okay. There's another story, and I really want to mention this because it's genuinely innovative. A company called Thinking Machines, which is run by Mira Murati, who used to be at OpenAI.
Yeah.
And everyone was really interested in what Thinking Machines was going to do. And they've just launched their first product.
Yeah, there's been a lot of buzz about this ever since she left. Everyone has been extremely curious about what she's going to do. I was obviously very excited about this because it's a female founder in a extremely male-dominated space. So it was nice to see her making waves. What did they actually launch, though?
It's a platform for fine-tuning AI models on really specialized tasks without needing massive data sets or really extensive machine learning expertise. They're calling it democratizing fine-tuning.
I'm going to ring the jargon buzzer. What does that mean for normal people?
Yeah, no, and I think this is just fascinating. It kind of ties into our small language model conversation we had.
For sure.
And there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace around training an AI versus fine-tuning an AI versus what is RAG and how that is different. So when you use ChatGPT or Claude, you're using a general purpose model that's been trained on huge amounts of data to be good at a lot of things. It's general purpose, right? Fine tuning is when you take that model, it's still the large language model that's really general, but you take that one and you specialize it for a very specific task. So this is like if you were to analyze medical records or your company's knowledge base or something like that, or generating code in a very specific programming language. These are all use cases for taking general purpose knowledge that are very smart, but then fine tuning it very specifically on what you want to do, which is different than training.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would that normally require, though? Because that sounds like it's a heavy lift.
Yeah, I mean, as you probably would expect, a huge data team, lots of engineers, specific knowledge. You have to take basically that general purpose knowledge that's open source and then use techniques to fine tune it on your own data. But what Thinking Machines has done is they've built a system where you can fine tune these models with much smaller data sets and without needing to be a machine learning expert. So it's, again, that democratizing fine tuning. You can basically give examples of what you want the model to do, and it handles the technical complexity behind the scenes.
That's really exciting. So why does it matter for us, though?
The reason I think it matters, or where this is going, is it's going to make really specialized AI. So we talk about how you may want to fine tune a model on your task and have it be really good at that task, where the general purpose model isn't. Well, now that kind of ability to make specialized AI, it makes it really accessible to everyone, but also to this audience, our audience, right? So before, if you wanted an AI model that deeply understood your specific business domain, you needed some serious resources, you needed a data team. Now you could potentially fine tune that model on your documentation, your customer interactions, and domain knowledge without code.
So instead of using a really generic ChatGPT that doesn't really know anything about your specific business, you could have a version that kind of understands all of your context.
And they're focused on making this really simple and affordable. So they're explicitly targeting small and medium-sized businesses with this release, not just enterprises.
See, that's what happens when you have a woman in charge. Most AI, yeah, exactly. Most AI infrastructure tools are priced for really big companies. So having options that work for smaller businesses as well is really, really important.
And might be where a lot of the innovation comes from. I think, as we've seen with the MIT study, enterprises are struggling to find, really good use cases around this. And I think we're going to see more of this. I think this is a really good signal in the market, taking really complex AI capabilities and packaging them in ways that don't require a data team or a PhD to use. That's where real value gets unlocked, and we're going to start seeing a proliferation of really unique, clever tools to solve complex problems.
Right. It is time for our favorite segment, AI Gone Wrong. And
Amazing.
This week's
Love it.
story is the perfect example of what happens when you trust AI detection without human judgment. So once again, gotta have that human in the loop.
This actually brings up some PTSD for me. So the Australian Catholic University accused 6,000 students of academic misconduct. About 90% of those accusations were based on alleged AI use to cheat. They used Turnitin. This is where I get my PSD because I remember when they launched Turnitin. Yeah,
really?
I
See,
had
this
to
was
use
after
Turnitin.
my time.
Yeah. So they used the Turnitin's AI detector, which flagged content as AI generated and sent out thousands of misconduct notifications automatically.
But the problem is that the detector was wrong by a lot. So the university ended up dismissing around 25% of the referrals and then established a policy that Turnitin's AI tool alone couldn't be used as evidence. Thank God, those poor students.
I know. Yeah, because again,
Stress.
cheating, I mean, that's like expulsion, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So a quarter of the accusations were false. And that's just right off the bat. Those are just the ones they caught. How many students were wrongly accused but couldn't prove their innocence?
So why do we think the AI detection was so unreliable?
I think a few reasons. The AI detectors flag patterns like consistent sentence structure and certain word choices. Hopefully none of those kids put emojis. That was probably a dead giveaway.
I mean, you would hope that you don't put emojis in a college level essay,
but these sentence structures that it flags, if you're dealing with that large of a sample size, many humans naturally write that way. Yeah. So especially in formal academic writing.
Especially in the formal academic way.
In academic writing, you're taught to write a certain way. So if everyone's writing the same way, it might come up as AI, but that's how you're supposed to write. Also, the other thing that I think is a real problem is non-native English speakers are particularly likely to be falsely flagged. So that's unjust or unfair. Meanwhile, students who actually use AI can easily evade detection by editing the output slightly. So ultimately, you might end up catching the wrong people because if you're using AI, you might know, I got to change a few things.
Yeah. See, it's that biases again, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's also kind of security theater, right? Like the tool
That's a great term.
Misses the actual cheaters, but it nails the students who just happen to write really well.
Yeah. And again, what I don't like about this is the black box nature of it. So Turnitin hasn't disclosed their false positive rate or how the detector has been trained.
That's not cool. Yeah.
So if you're making high stakes decisions about academic integrity, which potentially lead to students getting expelled,
these poor kids,
you cannot have it be a black box.
Yeah. And I think the bigger issue as well is how the university used it, because they really let the algorithm make, very consequential decisions about thousands of students without having a human in the loop. Like this could not only affect the students, future academic careers, but also like their potential real life careers as well. It's really, really negligent.
I mean, nothing wrong with using Turnitin to identify and flag issues. And then someone needs to go in and review it and identify, actually, does this look like slop? Or maybe have like a review with that student and understand and break down. But unfortunately, to your point about negligence, no one did that step. But the reason we bring this up, I think the lesson applies beyond academia. Anytime you deploy an AI agent for high stakes classification, so hiring, fraud detection, and we talk about content moderation, you need transparency. You need that human review and appeal processes as well. So just because a tool exists doesn't mean it's accurate enough for your use case. Okay, so let's bring things home with 3 quick takeaways from this episode about AI slop. First, slop is a symptom, not a cause. Love that. The problem isn't AI. It's people skipping the editing, validating, and value add steps. So use AI as a tool, not a replacement for judgment. Second, WorkSlop is costing real money. That $9 million per 1,000 employee figure should actually really scare business leaders. Stop rewarding volume, reward quality, and make sure that you build in review processes. Third, AI detection doesn't work, or at least shouldn't be the end all be all. Yes. If you're thinking about using AI detection tools for high stakes decisions, maybe think twice. False positive rates are very high. Use it as a signal for an investigation, but don't use it as proof. Exactly. Make sure that there is a human involved in that process so something can be flagged, but maybe you then validate it yourselves. Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for this week, Jess. If you found this valuable, share it with someone who needs to hear it, especially if they've been sending you obviously AI generated emails. A little passive aggressive, but just put the link in there and send it to them and see what they think. And remember, you can find us on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Just make sure you search early adopter. And remember, there is no E in adopter. Share your thoughts, your AI horror stories, or your success stories. We love to hear them all. Absolutely. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. And we will see you next week. See you next week. Bye.